Paul and I were laughing in a conversation a few days ago about the fact that these things always seem a bit competitive. And actually, I probably agree with about 93% of what Paul said. Absolutely. And I take very, very, very seriously what happened to Paul. When I became chair of the Senate group, what everyone assumed I was going to do was go and talk to all the gambling companies and sort of understand what they wanted. And people got very cross with me because in the first 2 or 3 months of my job, and I've only been doing it for just under a year, I spent the whole time with people who had destroyed their lives through gambling. So I absolutely, absolutely think there are some issues. I am completely convinced there are some issues. And what I wanted to do by talking to people who had destroyed their lives is to understand how that had happened. Paul was very kind enough to share what happened to him with us. I talked to somebody who had managed to pretty much get rid of £1 million in about 6 months and had, I think from memory, about 50 online betting accounts. And I just couldn't believe that he'd managed to hide that and no one knew, and literally nobody knew. In fact, they didn't know until the bailiffs arrived to take away the house. That's the first time his wife knew that he had a gambling problem. So I just say that to set some context. But I also want to remind you of some other things that Paul said, which is that 93% of people are okay. And that's the issue for me, because I don't think gambling's out of control. I think there is a problem and there are some challenges and they need to be addressed. And what I think is happening is that the industry is trying to address them, and that's really what I'm going to talk about. But I'm going to start by talking about someone else. I'm going to talk about my grandma, who I think of as a very, very old woman. I just realised on the train up that I'm thinking about her as a very old woman, and she's probably about 7 years older than I am now. But there you go. So when I was a kid, I used to go and stay with my grandmother, who lived just outside London, and my grandmother had been widowed, and she lived on her own. But 2 or 3 days a week, she'd bet on horses. She'd bet on a horse race most days, or certainly 2 or 3 days. And she and a neighbour would decide which horse to bet on, and one of them, whoever could walk best that day, would go and place a bet on the horse. And I think as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, I didn't really think of anything more than oh, I wonder why Grandma does that. And the answer is it gave her some excitement in her life. She was a widower, she lived on her own, she was a bit immobile, and it gave her some fun. And I think that gambling is an entertainment form, just like a cinema, and I think at that level it's completely fine. What isn't fine is what happens to people like Paul. And so I'm not in any way saying that we should ignore that. Paul suggested there were 450,000 absolutely problematic gamblers. As far as I'm concerned, that's too many. So I mean, just to completely state that for the record, Senate Group thinks that's too many. In fact, that's why we've been created, to try and help resolve that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my betting, just so you know exactly where I'm coming from. So I have a very, very important bet on at the moment. I have £5 for Manchester United to win the league, which didn't look too great when I took the bet at the beginning of the year, and now it's looking much, much better. And I always bet on the Grand National. I don't do very much else. I genuinely don't. But I think I drink sometimes a bit too much. That's a reality. In fact, last night I was at a Christmas party, and I don't know if any of you know London very well, but I was due to walk to Victoria Tube Station, and I found myself at Hyde Park. Those of you who know London will know that means I walked completely the wrong direction. So, but do I think that all drinking should be banned because last night I drank too much? No, I don't. But do I think drinking should not be advertised to young people? Absolutely. Do I think people should advertise drinking as making you sexy? Because I think I wasn't very sexy last night. No, I don't. And I have exactly the same issues around gambling. I think that adults should be allowed to gamble. I think adults can make those decisions. For those of you who don't live in London, which I assume most of you don't, going to the cinema in central London now costs you £25 a ticket. So really, honestly, this is full popcorn. I took my nephew the other day and thought, what? So it's about 50 quid, and that gives you an hour's entertainment. I think it's perfectly acceptable whether I want to take my nephew to the cinema or I want to bet. But what you cannot do is simply say that in a neutral way, because you need to say, and I agree with Paul absolutely, that there is a certain number of individuals for whom this becomes a disaster. And the industry's got to take that very, very seriously. So, What I think is that it's not out of control, that there are some quite big challenges and the industry is trying to resolve them. So let me just talk a little bit about my organisation, Senate. We have 3 things we're trying to do. We're trying to make the industry socially responsible. We are creating codes of behaviour and we want them to obey that. And we're also trying to help the government and regulators get this right. Now, when I say get this right, I don't mean, and I want you to be really clear about this, I don't mean produce little namby-famby things that no one cares about. I actually think that it's in the long-term interest of everybody, including people who run gambling companies, to take this seriously and get social responsibility right. Because if they don't, then quite rightly the government will legislate and legislate hard. And that's what I think they should do. So just to be clear again, I'm very much not saying it's all fine and we shouldn't do stuff. So just to give you some examples, one of the things that I'm very concerned about is young people seeing huge numbers of gambling ads and those being quite intense. So what we did voluntarily is to get our members to agree to not advertise certain types of particular bets that we thought were very problematic. Free betting, free bets, free sign-up before 9 o'clock at night. Now, what that means is that people who are members of the Senate group volunteered to not do some advertising, which all of their rivals were doing, and they did that at quite a big commercial loss to themselves. But they did it because they absolutely understood that you don't want children seeing these very high intense ads before 9 o'clock in the watershed. So that's the first thing they did. The second thing is, I think Amelia mentioned them, these machines in betting shops. We stopped them advertising those outside shops, in shop windows. And the reason we did that is that we don't want kids seeing that. So if you're an adult and you go into the store, I think that's a completely different issue, but we don't want big ads for machines on windows. So they all did that. And the third thing they did is that they agreed that whenever they have a poster, and you probably have seen these, and now you know who we are, there's that little bright yellow bit at the bottom which makes it some responsible gambling messages. So on every time they put a poster out, or any leaflets, they have to put an equivalent of the health warning on cigarette packets. Now, do I think this is a panacea and will have fixed everything? No, I don't, because I'm not an idiot. But do I think there's a process that we're going through? Yes, I do. So I'm going to give you an example of a similar process. So, as you probably can see from my hair, I'm of reasonable age. So I'm going to tell you that when I was in my early 20s, and I was in a bar, and it was late at night, somebody who had drunk 8 or 9 pints of beer would pick up their car keys and go, "Oh, love, I'll give you a lift home." And I would go with them. I know that sounds absolutely incredible to younger people, but it was completely socially acceptable to drink and drive. And actually it was a bit laddie and it was a bit, there was sort of, in a horribly stupid way, it was a bit cool. And the thought of doing this now, I just would never do it. The thought of my grandchildren doing it, or my nieces and nephews, are just absolutely horrifying. But I can absolutely assure you that people used to drink and drive and not think anything about it. Now, what happened over a period is that social responsibility became more of an issue. There were campaigns, and that's really what I'm trying to do the equivalent of. So, right now, if I started drinking and I had a car key and I picked up my car key, most people in this room would now say, "Come on, Wanda, leave the keys alone, love, get a taxi." That's actually now what most of you would do. And you would certainly not go, "Oh, thanks for the lift, Wanda." Yes, that's fine. You've got some language now that tells you to say, "Don't do that." And you hear people say, "Give me those keys." In my early 20s, no one ever said that. So what we are trying to do at the Senate is to create some language and some methodologies to help people to be able to say the same thing. And some of you may have seen it. We've paid £2 million to do some advertising campaigns. And the advertising campaign is basically looking at people who are behaving badly. In one case, betting too much on a machine, in another case, getting angry while he's on the internet. And we created a terminology of bad betting. And we did that because one of the things we know is that the people who are really, really at risk from gambling and getting into the situation that Paul talked about are 18 to 30-year-old men, or boys, whichever you want to call them. Now, no offence, because I can see some of the people in the room may be quite in that age group, right? So we all know that 18 to 30-year-old boys are absolutely the best people on earth to make judgments. okay? And they are completely fine, and they know their own capacity, and you say to them, don't do this, they think, and they do it. So all the evidence from anti-cigarette campaigns, anti-drinking campaigns, is that this group of people, 18 to 13-year-old boys, do not take well to being told to no. In fact, there's quite some evidence they take the reverse. If you say no to them, like, don't go on a motorbike, don't speed, do this thing, they go, yeah, idiots, I'm all right. So our campaign is amusing and fun. There's a tune to it. I won't offend everyone by singing it, but it's saying to people, think about what you're doing. Now, again, do I think this is going to resolve the problem overnight? Absolutely not. What I do know is that 1 in 3 adults have seen the ad and understood what it meant, which is, for me, much more important. And that 50% of people who say they gamble regularly say it made them understand that they have to think about when they're betting whether it's a good or bad bet. Now, this will change behaviour over time. We have to keep on doing campaigns and it begins to change it. And that's exactly what happened with drink advertising and cigarette advertising. Over time it begins to change attitude. So that's what we are very much trying to do. And so that tells me that the industry is not out of control. Actually, the industry is behaving responsibly and trying to make a difference. So I just want to talk to you about the things that we at Senate think prove that it's not out of control. We're trying to get 5 messages over. Set your limits at the start. People start betting, they only plan to spend 50 quid, before they know it they tell us they've spent 250 if they've got a problem. Only bet what you can afford. As Paul said, most people who get into very, very serious problems actually are betting someone else's money, in fact money they've stolen. Sometimes from their family, sometimes from work, and so on. And there's a number of other good ones about chasing losses, betting when you're angry. All of that stuff is designed to create a social atmosphere where people begin to think about it. So, I just want to tell you who I'm not going to be able to help. Frankly, I couldn't have helped Paul. I couldn't. Because as Paul said, he knew he hadn't got a problem. By the time you're in that serious trouble, people like the Senate group can't help you. There are some fabulous organisations who can. GamCare, a very good signposter. You mentioned Gordon Moody. There are some really, really excellent organisations. And so the industry accepts that once people have gotten to that very serious situation, they cannot help. What we can help, of course, is by funding those organisations and things like that. So what the industry is trying to do is to act responsibly. I just want to go on to say one other thing before I finish. If you were to ask me what I'm worried about, actually I'm worried about online more than anything else. And the reason I'm worried about online, and I'm not making a point for or against machines, but if you're playing machines or if you're in a betting shop, there are staff there who can see what you're doing. If you're completely blind drunk, I absolutely believe that most betting shops in this country would stop you. I was forced to go on some of the training schemes, so I know they take it very, very seriously. If it's 2 in the morning and you're on your own and you're online or on your mobile phone, absolutely no one's controlling you. And that, I think, is a concern. And that's why the next set of campaigns that the Senate are doing are not on TV, they're actually online. And what we're doing is we're creating, again, sort of humorous videos which show examples of the tips I told you about. So I'll just give you one. It's very difficult to do this. I want you to imagine there's a sand pit here. And lying in the sand pit there's 5 or 6 lads. And they're all a bit pissed and they're all laughing. And over here, back where that young man is the guy who's just said he can jump over all of them. This is seriously, this is a real video. So he starts the run up and he launches himself in the air and he doesn't quite get over the 5 lads. In fact, he hits the last lad in a part of his anatomy, which is a bit sensitive, if I can put it that way. So he hits him right between the legs. And every man who's ever seen that ad has gone, oh! The point we're making is you've got to know your limits. And the guy who's running towards the sandpit doesn't. Why am I doing that? Because I want to have people have a good dialogue about setting limits. And I want to do it in a way they won't feel it's preaching, but it's actually funny. I know that ad has already been shared hundreds of thousands, that little video has already been shared hundreds of thousands of times. So I know know, because I got to see little ticks and boxes, that most of you are actually in the group that says gambling is out of control. I would like you to think about whether gambling is in a position where it's trying very hard not to be out of control and be socially responsible. Thank you.